Kevin, thanks for joining us at Hub Dialogues.
No, thank you for having me, Sean.
Yeah, this conversation, Kevin, is happening at such an important time. Artificial intelligence and its applications to the economy, the government, and the broader society has climbed to near the top of the policy agenda. We had a big speech from our AI Minister, Evan Solomon, in recent days, talking about adoption versus sovereignty and some of the various trade-offs involved. And so being able to draw on your expertise and perspective, I think will help our listeners and viewers understand some of these big questions facing the country. And let me start precisely there, because one gets the sense, Kevin, that there is a growing debate in Canada right now about the right policy framework for AI, from regulation to innovation to competitiveness. At the highest level, how are you and your colleagues thinking about the core fault lines in Canada's AI policy conversation?
Yeah, sure, Sean. I mean, thank you again for having me. This is indeed a very important issue. I think it's important because the technology, if you kind of listen to some of the experts who are talking about this a technology, AI technology, really is going to usher in a new age of economic growth and prosperity.
Yes.
It is akin to potentially kind of foundational general purpose technologies like electricity. I think I was reading recently people talking about even going back to the printing press to draw on examples. This is a democratization of a very powerful technology across society. And
Yes.
so I think you can expect a lot of economic benefit, but also a lot of social benefit. And so when it comes to, at a very high level, to your point, when it comes to how should we think about this in Canada, I think it's worth pointing out that this really is a bit of a race. It's like almost like the space race in a sense. There are these
Yes.
countries around the world that are wanting to win this technological race because the potential upside is so high. And I mean, I think if you follow some of the geopolitical stories and the sort of economic stories, we're looking at really a race in the U.S. with a race with companies based in other countries like China. And the challenge with this is that these investments that are required to build foundation models and to kind of create this bright new future, it's going to cost billions and billions of dollars every year. And so when you bring it back to a country like ours in Canada, we are a middle power, we have a middle-sized economy. We really have to be thinking about how are we going to best connect and be part of this AI ecosystem in a way that's going to be beneficial to Canada, in a way that Canada can win without presumably spending the billions of dollars every year that other kind of bigger countries, bigger economies are doing. And I guess to close off on this at a high point, I think we've already heard from our Minister of AI. We've heard from the Government of Canada with the recent budget talk about how we do have to do some things in Canada, but also that it is, I think, as the minister has said, it is about sovereignty, not solitude. It is about trying to find ways to keep Canada connected to the global AI ecosystem, but in a way that benefits Canada. And I think that's probably the smartest way to go.
Yeah, talk a bit more about that precise point, Kevin, because I think that's how Canada has come to participate in the broader evolution of the internet and itself, as well as social media. That there's been a less effort or attention paid to developing indigenous models, if I can put it that way, or domestic ones, but instead plugging into these broader global supply chains. Why, in your mind, has that been beneficial for Canada and the right way to think about these new developments with respect to artificial intelligence?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think again, you have to come back to for people who are maybe coming at this a bit sort of cold. The level of capital investment that's required to build out these AI models is just astronomical. So when you think about, we're talking about training and doing the research and training to build a frontier AI model, so a very high performing world class AI model, you need compute to power to actually train it. You need data centers to actually run it. and to host the models. So we're talking about billions and billions of dollars of investments. And what's interesting about, I think, artificial intelligence is that because we talked about this race, every year these models get better. There's always a new model that's about to be released into the ecosystem. And so because of this, it's never a one and done kind of thing. These are
Yeah.
ongoing capital investments that are significant. And so for that reason, you really need to be smart about, I think, and strategic about where you do choose to invest. Because it's so expensive, there are only probably a few companies, a few countries that are able to do this sort of investment and maintain it over the longer run. And so for Canada as a middle-sized economy, it probably is strategic. And I do believe that is sort of where lots of policy makers seem to be leaning, is finding ways for Canada to do certain things that are important to be done in Canada, keep certain things secure, make sure that we have an ability to benefit commercially, but to also understand that we should be looking at building on top of tech stacks like AI models that are being created elsewhere, but that Canada can then adapt and own and run locally. And so one of the things, if I'll just finish with this point, one of the
Please.
things that we think is pretty important, and indeed, my understanding is the government of Canada already is kind of experimenting with this, is taking open source models that are probably created or could be created elsewhere, but then because they're open source, anybody can take it for free, anybody can fine tune it, adapt it, run it locally, take that and build applications, build use cases on top of it, that then become kind of made in Canada solutions, even if the tech stack, or at least part of it in terms of the foundation model, has been built elsewhere.
Yeah, you went precisely where I was going to go next, Kevin. Talk a bit about what open source AI is and how it may change traditional debates around sovereignty and domestic ownership.
Yeah, so open source, and I'm sure your listeners have heard this term from past sort of tech waves. If you think about things like satellites, if you think about things like operating systems, mobile smartphones, a lot of the standards that were created actually come from an open source ethos. And so that's just to say there is some technical standard that's created, but then rather than have a company keep it for itself and make it proprietary and then try to kind of sell it, it's actually given away for free. And so we do have a new kind of wave of open source innovation in the AI space, where these foundation models we're talking about that can power all those generative AI capabilities, chatbots, sort of generative video and image models. Some of these models, and of course, including Meta's models, such as Llama, they're open source. And so what we do is we just make them freely available. Anybody can then download these models. They can build on top of them, train them for particular use cases. But what's great about an open source approach is Meta's not actually trying to, or any other company that's doing this is not trying to make money off of it. We've invested billions into models like Llama, but then we give it away free in the hope that by democratizing this technology, everybody can benefit from running these things, and they can run them locally. So Canada, a business, a government can take these models, they can run them in Canada using local data and housed locally. None of that information or data comes back to any servers at Meta. And that's a way to get this powerful technology to as many people as possible at lowest cost as possible to help the entire ecosystem innovate as quickly as possible.
You started the conversation, Kevin, talking about the possible transformational economic benefits from AI akin to other general purpose technologies over modern history. Talk a bit about the potential economic upside of open source models versus proprietary only approaches. What might open source models unlock for Canada's economy that other models may impede or restrict?
Sure. I think I think basically the idea is I think we've all kind of seen the implications when we're kind of locked into a certain system. So if you think about the mobile economy, right, based on smartphones, there really are kind of two, if I could use the word, kind of two gatekeeping sort of ecosystems, right? One is the kind of iOS one from Apple. One is, the Android one with Google. And I think we've seen kind of economic rents kind of accrue to these, the proprietors, if you will, of these ecosystems. What we're looking at, hopefully, in the AI system is a much more democratized universe where, yes, there will be companies that do sell proprietary access to their models. So, things like OpenAI, perhaps, or Google Gemini or Anthropic. But then you also have, hopefully, the choice to go with open source models that will be just as performant, like Llama, like other open source models that exist in the ecosystem, but that then you can do without having to pay for access. And that just, by definition, democratizes that technology. It ensures that people are able to tinker with it, to experiment with it, to build innovative applications on it without needing to have to pay for access and to have sort of ongoing payments to continue using it.
Let's stay on the subject of open source and its unique characteristics or particularities, and I want to talk now about the subject of security, something you alluded to earlier. Instinctively, people might think that open source models are by definition less secure, but there are some in the technical community, I understand, who argue the opposite. Help our listeners and viewers understand this point.
Yeah, I mean, it actually, if you think about it, and you look at the history of technology, it actually has been the case that things that are open source, that are open for inspection, that are open for innovation, tend to be the most secure. Because if you think about a system that is closed, you actually don't know what are the weaknesses of that particular system you're accessing. Only the proprietors do. And what we've found in the technological space is when you're opening it up to the entire community of developers, then very quickly you're able to understand where certain security weaknesses may be, and you can move very quickly to address them. That is kind of the nature of the evolution of software development. That is just sort of the way it is. You want to have an entire ecosystem looking to try to identify bugs, to try to identify weaknesses. And so actually, you look at the history of technology, it's been open source that has been the most secure. I would also say, what is nice about open source is that you're able to run these things locally. And so where there have been, I've read, there are some considerations for some organizations who maybe are managing very sensitive data, perhaps health data as an example, and you say
Yes.
to yourself, well, we don't want to have people's health data going all over the place. We want to make sure, let's say you're a hospital, you want to make sure you run this stuff locally because you have patient data, and you want to have access to very powerful AI tools. I know some hospitals, for example, who are using AI and they're actually powered by Llama. They're using AI to try to match potential cancer patients with clinical trials. And the AI can help do that match and can help find patterns much more efficiently than if you were just to do it just with people looking through the data. But you need compute to run this sort of matching process, and you need to store this information. And you don't want, perhaps as a hospital, don't want it going somewhere else because of the nature of the personal data, the health data. And so with open source, you can actually run this whole system, the model, the compute, the storage, all of it, you can run locally on premise. And that's possible because you are actually taking the model and basically taking ownership of it locally.
Kevin, before we zoom out to some separate but related issues, I want to ask a question that I suspect is on the mind of our listeners and viewers who are hearing the case for open source models and their economic and security upsides. Without asking you for commercially sensitive information, just talk a bit about the economics of open source. What would be the rationale or logic for a company like Meta choosing that direction when others have obviously gone different ways?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think it's the right question to ask. And so I'd have to say we're not disinterested in this. We're not, we're doing this because we frankly are able to do it. We're in a kind of a nice position because we don't make money off of our AI models.
Hmm.
We obviously, as a company, are making money off of advertising, and so that gives us the ability to try to innovate in a new space and kind of the future of computing and technology, but then be able to say, well, and as I mentioned earlier, we don't want a repeat of the past. We don't want a system to create a system or be in an ecosystem where there were kind of two companies that basically controlled access to this new computing platform. We want to make sure that it is open and democratized so that we will all benefit. And Meta sees it as being part of that. And so if we can play a leadership role in helping create new standards that are for the entire ecosystem. We kind of get out of the challenges we've had with the mobile economy, or the mobile internet economy, but we also are going to benefit because the more, as we talked about from a security point of view, the more eyes are on something and the more people are developing on it, it will just make that standard better. And so if we can help do that, then I think there's going to be naturally benefits to the company.
Well said. Let's pivot a bit to talk about Meta, Canada, and some of these broader questions around digital technology. These are my words, not yours. But I'm concerned about a false dichotomy we're seeing play out in a lot of the policy conversations about quote unquote Canadian versus foreign companies. Meta, of course, has a significant footprint in Canada. You're speaking to me from Canada. Talk a bit about the company's contribution to Canada's digital ecosystem in general and its AI one in particular.
Well, sure. So you're absolutely right. I am actually in the Toronto office, so the background's a bit, it's a bit corporate-y here. But indeed, I mean, the company was founded, I believe it's 2004. We've had a footprint in Canada since 2010. We now have 3,000 people across the country, including a really sort of frontier, thought-leading AI research lab in Montreal.
Yes.
We're very proud of the contributions we made to the country. We're also obviously as a platform powering and helping to grow small businesses across the country that are using our platform, and also many institutions and people who use it to engage and connect and interact. And so I think there are just it's to your point, maybe not the right way to think about it as us versus them.
Yes.
But it's really more how can we work together? And I don't want to say that there are some things that you shouldn't want to have as Canadian only. Those are, I think, legitimate policy questions and policy choices. But I would just point out, and I think this is where you're getting at, when you talk about the digital economy, it really is a globalized economy. One very clear example that we've already kind of dived into was just this idea of how do you get the capital investment to build frontier models so that Canada can stay at the cutting edge. And so that already clearly points to a direction of we've got to presumably not have barriers around our economy, but be connected to a supply chain or to a tech stack that is beyond Canada. And so indeed, very much, I think if we are all concerned about the future of Canadian economic prosperity, which I think we all are,
Yes.
we definitely have to be smart about it and strategic and being wise about what we choose to build uniquely in Canada and what we are going to be kind of opportunistically looking elsewhere to pull in Canadian's economy, the Canadian economy, a success.
Yeah, well, I want to come back to a question I posed earlier, and that is about Canada's traditional policy in the past several decades with respect to the digital economy, and that is one of openness and a recognition, precisely as you say, of its globalized nature. Talk a bit about the idea of openness as a strategic advantage for Canada and how Meta sees Canada as part of its broader global supply chains.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just so important. I mean, openness is going to allow for Canada, which again we talked about how it's a it's a by size, both in terms of the population size, like the market size, but also in terms of the economy. It's going to have to really be open and connected to the global economy, and so we just have to be strategic about this. We, at Meta, I mean, I think it's important as one example to show like leadership here is, our AI lab in Montreal is obviously a part of a rich ecosystem in Montreal of AI researchers and startups. But also because we are open source, a lot of the things that we're publishing out of our FAIR lab, our Facebook Artificial Intelligence Fundamental AI Research Lab, all of that work is actually given away freely back into the research and commercial ecosystem. And so there's a way where we can lead as Canadians and really produce some frontier research, but then also be able to give back to the system, whether it be in Canada or global. And I think that's one of the reasons why we actually have a research lab in Montreal.
You started the conversation, Kevin, by situating some of these big questions in the government's own policy agenda. We're speaking a couple of weeks after the 2025 budget, which set out a series of commitments with respect to AI, including public sector adoption, research capacity, etc. What's your assessment of the government's approach thus far? Are we, in your mind, prioritizing the right things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a budget with some really great language, I think, about AI and the importance of making sure that we are focused on research and talent, and I think on the governmental side, making sure that we are just transforming the way we do things. It sounds like the government is moving ahead with an office charged with thinking through how we make things more efficient using AI. Finding ways to get things done at a more rapid pace using AI. But of course, I think we're going to have to sort of see what the specific details are. Again, as we've talked about, I do think, and based on my conversations with some people in the government, I take note that open source is very much in the toolkit for them. So I think there are actually very smart people working in the government of Canada and the public service who understand that, well, if we are going to be trying to build systems that are going to be Canadian in nature, that are going to be trained on Canadian data, but at the same time, we want to make sure that they are as localized as possible, then taking AI models that are open source, built potentially or trained elsewhere, but that we can run locally in Canada within the government is going to be a very important option for us. And it's great to hear that indeed is being explored and pursued.
You've mentioned a couple of times the potential transformational implications of AI technology at scale. At a time when Canada's economy is facing slow growth and, of course, is a subject of extraordinary uncertainty because of evolving trade dynamics, how important, in your mind, is it, Kevin, that we get this right? And how do we convince Canadians that this is a technology that we need to, quote unquote, lean into as industry and government?
It is, I think it's absolutely critical, Sean. I mean, this is not you and I just speaking here off the cuff. It's
Yes.
reports after reports, year after year. I think it's been very much documented that the Canadian economy is not as performant as other peer countries' economies are. And we just have to be able to step up this pace or metabolism for growth,
Hmm.
for productivity increases, for innovation. And so, if you look at it right now, big key opportunity before us is the use of artificial intelligence to really reimagine and to render more efficient all these things that are coursing through the economy. And so we really do want to make sure that we are thinking smart about this. This is a Again, this is not me saying this. There's economists who are saying this could be a new, where we could be at the cusp of a new industrial revolution where you have a general purpose technology like electricity that's going to end up kind of going through all sectors of the economy and making things more efficient, making things more effective, and that's going to lead to growth. And so, what we want to make sure is that we are not that we understand the opportunity ahead of us and that we do seize it. Again, I think the budget, based on what we've read, I think it looks like government leaders are very much aware of this important opportunity. And so now we just have to, sort of move forward with a sense of purpose. And if I may say, it's not just
Please.
obviously just government. I think some of the reports I've read, they're saying that it's equally a business challenge in Canada. This idea of AI adoption. So
Right.
yes, government should adopt AI and make service delivery better. But I think also economically, for businesses, it's the same. It's the same point. And we have to have frameworks in place that are going to incentivize AI adoption. But we also just have to all individually in different organizations have to make sure that we understand the opportunity ahead of us, regardless of if you're in the public or private sector, and seize it now. In the midst of, as we talked about at the very beginning, clearly this global AI race, it is a global phenomenon, and we do have to make sure we're part of it.
You're a modest guy, Kevin, so I won't ask you a question prefaced by if you were king for a day. But from your point of view, someone who has spent his professional life here in Canada, but is part of a global company, and so you have these two really interesting vantage points. Where do you see Canada's comparative advantage in contributing to this global phenomenon, as you put it? Is it around energy? Is it around talent? Is it around research? Is it around startups who are plugging into some of these uh, bigger and broader tech stacks? Like how, if you were advising the government, where do you see entry points for Canada to participate in the upside?
Yeah, I think that for Canada, again, we just talked a bit about how it's a global race. We've talked about how there are other countries and different companies that are positioned to build certain parts of the tech stack, like the foundation models that power a lot of this stuff. But if you look at sort of the recent history of the internet, a lot of the wealth, right, in the economy has been generated through kind of the application layer. So
Mhm.
we know this is going to be this is a powerful technology. We've starting to see glimmers of how it's changing the way we do things. But I'm pretty sure that the true kind of killer use cases, if you will, the killer apps, if you will, of AI, we don't fully have a line of sight into yet. And so I think that where Canada can uniquely play is to leverage the AI tech stack and figure out what at the application layer, what
Yeah.
at the kind of use case layer is going to be world changing. And it will be good for Canada's economy. But I mean, as you talked about, we should have and have had a tradition of being an open economy. We should be aiming to build global giants based in Canada. We have some in the country. Shopify is a wonderful example of that, a
Of
global
course.
platform for commerce. What can we do now to try to nurture and promote global players based in Canada in the age of AI? And I think we're fully equipped to do it. I think that's where the wealth is to be had, and I'm hoping that entrepreneurs are going to pursue that.
Final question. Within that framework, Kevin, where do you see a company like Meta fitting into Canada's AI strategy? How can you enable those opportunities for Canadian companies and Canadian suppliers on one hand, and on the other hand, provide the foundation for public and private institutions to enhance their productivity, improve service delivery, and ultimately achieve better outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different ways. Of course, our family of apps, the platforms that we run, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp, those are already being used by businesses in Canada, but also around the world to help power their businesses. And we think that there's obviously going to be a big role there for those platforms to help the next big idea in Canada commercialize. But obviously, going back to what we talked about, when we talk about AI, we have very powerful and performant AI models like Llama. We would love to help ensure that is part of the option set for people who are trying to build at the application layer, that want to build sort of the next leading platforms and businesses based in Canada. So we're here, and we want to be supporting. And as a Canadian, obviously, you and I think we both hope that this will be the beginning of a new economic growth moment for the country, and all these tools will be part of that.
Here, here. Kevin, just a ton of insight helping our audience understand some of these nuances and dynamics that I think we're going to hear about more and more as this issue looms larger over our politics and the minds of Canadians themselves. Kevin Chan, Global Policy Director at Meta, thank you so much for joining us at Hub
Always a
Dialogues.
pleasure. Always a pleasure, Sean. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care. Bye bye.